A very good morning to you and welcome to another very exciting Future of Media online event, proudly brought to you by the good folks at Arena Events and our amazing sponsors for making it happen. Thank you so much to them. This is a platform where industry experts across various media, marketing, and digital disciplines help you plan for success by sharing their creative best practices. I'm Sia Sangweni, again, very, very thrilled and pleased to be your master of ceremonies and moderator for this conversation. Now, in this next hour, here's what you can anticipate. We'll be having a very insightful conversation, and today it's themed around advertising in the Goldfish Economy. Now, certainly going to be an interesting one to get into. I'll be joined by my panelists shortly for a discussion before also opening up to some of your questions. So please feel free to send us your questions or your comments as we get to a Q&A a little later on. So feel free to send those through. This morning's conversation, though, and this theme will hopefully allow you to walk away with a better understanding about generating real ROI in an age, let's be honest, where consumers are time-starved, and also hopefully will help you figure out how you can nurture yourselves and others to be brimming with, let's be nice and say, unencumbered creativity, fresh, innovative thinking, and also motivated to be productive. So we'll be looking at how brands can grab the limelight in a very competitive landscape. We'll also examine how increasingly those that invest in data, in insights, in people, and marketing are the ones that will stand out in this goldfish economy. And so why the phrase goldfish economy? Well, it's said that goldfish only have the attention span of 8 seconds and that humans are not so far behind. So I don't know, it's either very scary to consider that or actually quite refreshing to think about, right? Well, in this age that has become so fast moving and always connected, the distractions of, the ringing phone, a pinging app, Insta this, TikTok that, has truly meant that our ability to hold focus is ever more precarious. And as our lives get busier and attention spans shorter, marketers face quite a great challenge in getting their brands top of mind with consumers. Do you know what I mean? Here's a little exercise that you can do with yourself. I wonder if you were able to make it through my introduction so far without even looking down at your phone. See what I mean? We all have those moments. Look, there are so many components to get into around this, how we're always on and bombarded by competing demands for our time, how we have to look and create at creative and engaging content, productivity in this highly competitive and pressurized fields of marketing and advertising, and so much more. So I can't wait to get started and get into this conversation. So hopefully you'll be staying with us over the course of the next hour. But we would love to hear your thoughts on the poll. So the first poll question is, do you personally feel that your productivity and creativity have been impacted? Now, keeping in mind the context of the times that we're living and working in. So option number 1 is yes, and option number 2 is no. And our second poll question is, what is more important when developing a marketing campaign, in your opinion? Option number 1, grabbing consumers' attention as fast as possible, or option number 2, evoking emotion. Really love to hear what you think about that, and then we'll be sharing those results as we wrap up today's conversation. So got it? Great, then let's get straight into it. I'd like to welcome my panelists for today. First up, an apology on behalf of Lee Carter, who isn't able to join us this morning, but the show goes on nonetheless, and we hope you feel better soon, Lee. We kick off though with Noah Khan. He is the Regional President of Digital and Innovation EMEA. Noah, how are you? Good morning.
Good morning. I'm well, thank you. And I'm really glad to be on the panel.
Fantastic. I can't wait to pick your brain and get into the conversation. So thank you so much for being with us. And then we also have Aspo Ofori Amanfo, who's the Senior Account Manager at Wrapped Creative Agency. Good morning, Aspo. How are you?
Morning. I'm doing really well. How are you?
Fantastic. Can't wait to also get into the conversation with you. So I want to get straight into it and kicking things off with a question for you, Noah. We're going to hear a lot about creativity and we're going to hear a lot about innovation in our conversation this morning. So just to provide some framework to our conversation, in your opinion, Noah, how do you define creativity? How do you define innovation? And why are those two components so important in brands today?
So for the first one, I think creativity is how we express ourselves as individuals. It's about the clothes I choose. It's about the music I like. It's about the trainers I wear. And I honestly think it's not too different to the way brands express themselves. So creativity for a brand is all about expression. And innovation for us at TBWA is the way to beat incrementalism. So we have this saying internally where innovation is the antidote to incrementalism. And it's the way through which we think brands are going to capture a share of a greater future. And I like to explain it as looking at the new rather than aiming for the new and improved. So it is how we start bringing creativity and innovation to provide growth for brands. I think is going to be what's top of mind for us this year and moving forward.
Fantastic. Espo, I want to pose the same question to you. How do you define creativity? How do you define innovation? And why are those two so important when working with brands?
Yeah, so for me, I think that both go hand in hand, especially within at least my environment within advertising. I don't think that you can have creativity without innovation and vice versa. Just like Noah said, I think that creativity is the expression, right? It is the way that it comes out. And obviously innovation is like a smarter way of thinking, a smarter way of doing something. And in order to have that innovative thinking come out, that's where creativity comes, or that's where it gets involved, right? So in a world of advertising, where the environment is changing all the time and we're faced with new factors, new difficulties, new points of tension, we have to think. So that's where the innovative comes in, the innovative element. We need to think smartly about how we're going to tackle those walls that come up and how we can still, obviously satisfy the brand and also reach our consumers. And I think that's where creativity comes in. So that's why I see it paired together. You can't have one without the other, or I don't think you can successfully have one without the other.
Yeah, that's great insight. Awesome stuff. Noah, thinking about the work that you do, technology gives us understandably and undeniably very powerful new tools for enhancing our client and consumer experiences. So how, in your opinion, do digital communications and social media impact consumer brand interactions and relationships, and also factoring in what role social media has played in sharing information? I know it's a mouthful there.
No, it's a great question. So for me, the digital space has opened up a level of exploration of creativity that has gone way beyond what has come before. So, we're currently looking at multiple spaces across augmented reality, and this allows you to be as creative as your creative mind lets you be. So we're able to augment spaces, we're able to build new experiences. And through those, I think we're able to bring brand and consumer closer together. There have been so many examples of how these technologies have allowed us to help consumers get through the last couple of years over the pandemic. I mean, a really simple example is most restaurants you go to these days no longer have menus. So you're having to use QR codes that then translate into the menu on your mobile device. And that's just a really simple example of how these platforms have continuously helped and transformed way beyond comms themselves. And social for us, I think, is where a brand gets to be its true, honest self. It is a platform where you gain an immediate response from your audience. It is where you can truly engage on a one-on-one level. And through that, I think brands are able to really build a connection with the audience that they're talking to. And the shareability on social, again, is important because whatever you're doing, the aim is for you to try and get your audience to become your advocates of your message rather than you trying to push your message further and further down more and more audience segments. So building content that lives on social that helps your brand be advocated for, I think, is something that it allows us to do using those platforms.
Awesome. Well, Aspo, I want to pick up on a few things that Noah has mentioned. Social media, how that provides brands the opportunity to be authentic and very sincere in their communication there. It's a bit of an unfair question to ask you, possibly, but I'm sure you have this posed to you all the time when working with brands. What makes things trend on social media? What makes video trend on social media, like YouTube or TikTok or Snapchat, and how can brands use that to their advantage?
Right. So, yeah, that question is very interesting for me because I don't think that there is an answer, and I'm happy to be educated or schooled if I'm wrong. Please absolutely teach me. But I don't think that there's a formula or a step-by-step process into how to get something to trend or become, I hate the word viral, but because it's people that get things to trend, right? People create the virality around things. And as much as there can be so many studies done and things like that, people aren't as predictable as we like to think, right? So how do we put a step-by-step process together for an audience that is unpredictable, in order to get something to trend? So I don't think that that's possible. I also think that it depends on the time and what's going on. I think there's a certain level of consciousness you have to have, or a brand has to have, on what's happening around you at the moment, right? So maybe if I had to push my thinking, it would probably be creating content that's authentic, relatable, maybe humorous or entertaining for various reasons. And just an example I quickly want to give is the brand that I worked on before, so Chicken Licken. We created this TV or this campaign called Soulful Nation that featured Tyson Ngubeni, and it went live about 2 years ago this time, actually, during the hard lockdown period. So if you think about where we're at, COVID was the unknown. It was the big and bad, like, werewolf that we didn't understand. We didn't have vaccinations. We weren't allowed to go out. So there was quite a bit of fear going on at the time. And even though humorous things had happened, it had happened in like waves. And then, then comes the panic and then comes the fear. But with that campaign, what we did was stitch together all of the little funny things that had happened on social media or on the news, put it together with the amazing Tyson Ngubeni, who was the lead in that TVC, and maybe within a couple of hours of going live, it trended. I mean, it went like off the charts, and that's one of my favorite things, to just sit and see how people respond to some communication. But if we had to create the same ad and go live with it today, I don't think it would have done as well. Not because the work wasn't good, not because the input wasn't there or the hard work, but because the time has changed, right? We're no longer where we were about 2 years ago, where we're all cooped up inside, really afraid of COVID. It's the unknown. And I think it did so well at that time because we needed humor, especially in the South African context. We laughed through some hard times, whether it be a good thing or not a good thing. That's how we find some release, right? So I think it uplifted us in that moment, but I don't know if it would have had the same effect if it went live now, just because of how times have changed and we're out in the world a little bit more.
Right. So that's an interesting idea and insight to provide around, quite bluntly, people are people. And so there's no formula in how people react or people behave. So I want to throw it back to you, Noah. Factoring that in, how do you think geopolitical news impacts marketing and content? We look at great success stories, when we win at the Olympics, Black Coffee just won at the Grammys. But then we also look at the flip side when we've dealt with so much hardship and devastation recently, what's happening in Ukraine, the Black Lives Matter movement. How do events like that factor in and weave into marketing and content nowadays?
So I just want to pick up on something Asbo was saying in regards to content. And she mentioned the cultural barometer on how these things are measured. And I think culture and our audience are a clear indicator of what the world is feeling at any given time. And for a brand to truly make a commitment, stand for a point of view, I think first they need to understand what actually is going on around them. The second thing I think that is really important is authenticity. When brands try and jump on a bandwagon to try and join a group to piggyback on something that's happening where they don't truly believe or they truly aren't committed to it, you can see those failures happening. So I think these are moments when it gives brands a real opportunity to celebrate, to stand for something, and to truly show what they are as a brand, as an organization, as a collection of people. I remember the very first time I went to Moscow, and our agency team was sort of taking me around, and one of the things they stopped at was the very first McDonald's that was opened in Moscow. And they were very proud of it. They said, look, there were lines here for 14 hours. We all stood here to get our Big Macs when it first opened. So for McDonald's to close that store clearly sends a signal that they are with the people of Ukraine. They are against the actions of Russia. And it takes away an iconic presence within a country. So for brands to make those commitments and to make those actions happen, I think there has to be true belief in what you're doing, and you really need to be able to follow through on that as well.
So Noah, and this is for you, Noah, and for Asper as well, because I think we're getting into quite an interesting point in this conversation. Factoring in people's attention span. There's an interesting thought that I found as was preparing for today's conversation, and it's a phrase that says, it's time for brands to stop interrupting what people are interested in and be what interests people. So let's be practical about it. I would understand the fear, the uncertainty, the walking on eggshells. I think that's a little too subtle. Walking a bit on a landmine when it comes to approaching or including certain topics. You want to talk about what people are interested in, but you might not want your brand to take too much of a political stance. You want to be involved in what is happening on Twitter, but you might not want to bring your brand into jeopardy, into some of the negative conversations that might happen there. So where do you draw the line, or how do you make that balance? I'd love to hear that from both of you.
So I can sort of pick up on that, or let Asbo go. So we have this saying internally, where we keep discussing this with clients, is about doing the brave thing. It's not doing just the right thing. You have to try and go that one step further and do the brave thing. An example is, and I'm based in Dubai. So when Saudi Arabia a few years ago gave women the right to drive, we were the first agency to produce a piece of work that celebrated that movement for Nissan as a brand. And we managed to get all of this done in less than an hour. And the key then was we had a client that was brave enough to act on that moment. We had an agency that was able to produce creative that spoke to that moment. And culturally, when we put it out into the world, the audience responded. So I think it is about doing the brave thing. I think it is about agencies and brands coming together and acting on those moments. And not every brand has to act on every single thing. I think there has to be a true brand belief that resonates. And then when you do proceed with that, you really do see the reaction from the world around you.
All right, so doing the brave thing. Aspo, do you echo those sentiments?
Absolutely. I think that as advertisers, so that's the area that I'm in, I think that we have a responsibility as communicators to drive a bigger message that's not just something to advertise for the brand that you work for, you know. I think we have a responsibility to drive through different kinds of messages, especially if I look specifically within the context of South Africa. There's so much history, there's so much heritage, and there's so much that still needs to be achieved that I think we'd be doing, dare I say, like our country or the people who reside within South Africa a disservice if we don't make use of those opportunities to communicate something further than just messaging for the brand, you know. So I completely agree with what Noah is saying. It does take, so I'm a bit twofold. So there are moments to be brave, absolutely, because if we don't communicate it or push for that communication, then who will? You know, we have a platform and a reach that we need to utilize to communicate certain messages further, because there's so many people on the ground that are doing it, that sometimes I wonder, how dare we not contribute towards that if we have the platform, the means, the access. But at the same time, I don't think that every space is meant for every brand, right? And it really makes me cringe when I do see brands try and kind of, contribute towards a certain conversation or jump on, maybe even if it be a certain trend, when it doesn't really align with who they are or what they've usually been.
What's the differentiator? How do you make that separation, or how do you get to understanding that this space might not be for my brand?
I think it's authenticity, honestly. And I think it's about trying to understand what objective are we trying to reach here, you know? And that should be a discussion that, whether it's from the brand team or the advertising team, just what are we actually trying to achieve? Do we want to contribute towards this conversation because it's maybe like a hot topic or something that everyone's talking about? Or does this really resonate with our what word can I use? With what we truly, ethos, or what we truly believe in, because I never want to contribute towards something just because, you know, like we're kind of blitzing in and blitzing out. If you support something or you have a stance for something, it should carry through in all the kind of communication that you do thereafter. I think that it can be a bit. I think that it can be quite obvious when a brand is just jumping on something for jumping's sake or because it's a hot topic. And I think that can be quite damaging towards the actual thing that's being discussed, and also obviously towards the brand. So I think it's about authenticity. I think it's about knowing your place, and also about actually having people on your team that are brave enough to possibly push back and say, I don't think that this is the space that we should be playing in. I don't think that it's authentic and honest to who we are.
Yikes. Noah, have you ever been in a position where you've had to just tell brand X, look, just stick to selling cheese. You're not going to change the world. Just talk about the cheese plan and how it looks in bread. Enough, that's it.
There have been a few conversations. One of them has been with clients that are in the energy space, and they see all of the work that's coming around the corner in regards to movements around being more eco-friendly, being focused on carbon neutrality and various other things, and they're very keen to be part of that conversation and to show what they're trying to do to help. But there, to Asbo's point, if there is no clear follow through, and if you're simply trying to jump on a trend, the audience calls you out very, very quickly. So choosing to be on trend for a moment can actually do you a lot more harm than good. So we do have conversations with clients where we speak to them in great detail about where they should be present and why they can be in those spaces, because it speaks to their brand values and it's authentic, and the audience expects them to have a point of view on certain things. And in others, we actually discourage them not to, because we feel it doesn't carry through for what they want to do in the longer term.
Okay, so then Asbo, in essence, you've answered my question, which was around your recommendation to brands, particularly South African brands, in how they deal with our very, very diverse nation with all of its nuances. Is there anything else you'd like to add on this point in particular?
Absolutely, because I feel very passionate about this question.
Take this flag and run with it.
I feel so passionately about it, and I think it's in kind of separated into two spaces, right? I really value like market research, right? I really value those insights that it can give you, with a little bit of an asterisk next to it, in the sense that there's importance in research and getting to know your audience, absolutely. But I don't think you should just take that research and apply it because it said 60% of people do this or 10% of people do that. I think that if anything, it needs to be further interrogated and tested before you kind of go out with a certain kind of communication. But my biggest thing is, I think that there's a responsibility on brands and their teams, and then also agencies and internally, on who they hire, because South Africa, like we've spoken about at length, is so rich and diverse in its heritage, in its culture, and those are the people that you're trying to target, right? You're trying to speak or communicate a certain message to an audience, but how do you do that if you don't have the people on your team? You don't have the people in your space, because there's certain nuances that just can't be learned. They have to be experienced. And I think my favorite word is authentic, because it has to be experienced authentically, right? I can't just pull someone in the room and ask, does this resonate? Does this make sense? And use a sample of one and then apply it to a bigger group, right? So I think there's so much importance in ensuring that your team is structured in a way that reflects the space or the country or the environment that you're in. And I think that's golden, because then instead of just trying to understand the people that you're reaching, you actually have the people on your team. And yes, it's still a smaller team, and it might not speak to absolutely everyone that you're trying to reach, but at least you have that proper insight literally on your team. So I think it really comes down to who you hire. And I think that we've gotten that wrong before. And I hope that it's something that we look at getting right, because there's so much talent out there. Then it might not be that they, the people that you want to hire have all the degrees or the qualifications that you see as or deem as something that they need to have. But you can't study social cues. You can't study nuances. You can't study culture, essentially. You can only live it. And by living it, you can only hire those people to be on your team. Like if I look at myself, I'm a first generation born South African. So my parents are from Ghana. And even in that, I feel complex in the way that I am as well, because I very much feel Ghanaian, but I very much feel South African. But I can't speak for other first gens, So it takes a lot of research, a lot of insight, a lot of learning to be able to reach different kinds of people, and not just have one be the blanket research or I think it's convenient research or something. The term is something like that for everyone else.
There's a great line in a song from the musical Hamilton that I think encapsulates exactly what you were speaking about. It says, in the room where it happens, and speaking about the importance of being in the room where it happens. So I totally agree and echo those sentiments, Aspo. Noah, now looking at authenticity and continuing our conversation around creativity and innovation, how, or what rather, is the importance of driving creativity and innovation in media owner, in agency, and in brand cultures these days?
I think without creativity, and I mean no offense to any of the media owners, but I think without creativity, you simply end up filling media spaces. And that's where messaging becomes boring. That's where everything sort of looks the same. And that is when an audience simply stops responding to what you're trying to say. So making sure creativity is seen in every single thing that you do, every single piece of messaging you put out has an element of creativity. You also have to build that creative relationship with the brand, because unless the brand understands what you're trying to communicate and how the brand essence sort of flows in and enables you to create that creative expression of it, again, it doesn't work. And the last bit is actually working with the media partners themselves. So if you have a great creative idea, the best thing to do is get in a room with the media agency and talk to them about what you're trying to do and where it would be best placed when ready, rather than working on a creative idea in one silo versus the media plan and trying to mesh them together, because that's usually when you end up with horrible cut downs that fail on pretty much every level.
Cool. I want to take this opportunity now just to go to some viewer questions, and this is open to you, Aspo, and you, Noah, to answer should you want to comment on this. The first one is quite a philosophical one, if I say so myself. The person is asking, bear with me here, is there a difference between creativity and practicality? They go on to say, can we say our forefathers were creative when they developed the wheel under their circumstances, or were they just trying to be practical about moving objects? Noah?
I think it's one and the same. I think the us trying to solve problems is what sparks a lot of our creativity. I think trying to move heavy loads from one place to the other is what forced our ancestors to try and fashion the wheel. It was trying to keep ourselves warm and away from scary animals that moved us to inventing fire. And it's that necessity that has led us to be creative in solving problems that addresses the practical need. A lot of work we've seen happening through the pandemic would not have happened if there wasn't one. So trying to find creative solutions to those practical problems, I think, is what makes us such a great species as a whole.
That's a dope answer. Here's another viewer question. I think this is a little similar to what Aspo was speaking about, but someone asked, how important is talent and diversity within a team when it comes to creativity? Aspo, do you want to touch on that? Okay?
Yeah, I think I'll just touch on that because once again, passionate about that. I'm not in an employer's position. I'm an employee or like a partner with the agency that I work with or work at. But I've always been bothered by this, not specific to any way that I've worked, but just knowing the kind of talent that's out there, right? And the kind of opportunities that people have lacked to be able to contribute towards the creative world or the advertising industry. I can understand in certain spaces or areas why a certain kind of training or education, formal education, let me say that, is needed to maybe like craft certain skills and things like that. But I think advertising is an amazing industry where I want to say that almost anyone can contribute towards it, right? I know that a lot of us study towards it, have experience in it, and have put certain kind of work in. But I don't think that that should be a complete barrier to entry to those who have the passion, who have the thoughts, the insights, the experience to being in the industry. And I think that almost anyone can contribute towards a campaign, and then I think others can help craft it and maybe like better word it or better how can I say better mold it in a way that's more sellable to the client, or how to fit it into certain areas. But I just and maybe someone will teach me differently, but I believe that anyone can kind of contribute towards campaigns and absolutely bring in the diversity factor.
Noah, do you agree with what Asper just said? And I also want to tie in another viewer question who asked, Asper mentioned hiring the right people and talent. On that note, how important is practical education and training? Can too much training cause burnout?
So sort of picking up on what Asper was saying, we keep talking about this quite a lot internally, is rather than creating for, we like to create with. So there's a lot of conversation around, what would Gen Z expect from a certain piece of communication or a certain piece of creative work. And where we made major shifts on our side over the last many years is making sure that audience is part of the creative process. So we make sure we have a diverse mix of people working on every piece of work that we produce. And if it is especially a specific piece of audience, we try and collaborate if we don't have those skills or if you don't have those specialists in-house. So I completely agree with what Asper was saying. It is about bringing together the right mix of people, because diversity produces, in my opinion, the richest of work we can expect. And going to the training and learning, we always say, look, we hire for attitude. You can skill somebody out, you can train them, but it's got to be somebody that's got the right attitude. And that does sit between learning and training. There are many people that work in our offices that have not had formal education in the advertising or marketing industry. They've come from other places. And those varied experiences actually add a level of richness to our thinking and the way we approach things. We also have people that specialize in certain areas. So we have specialists that are data scientists that have trained in that field and bring that knowledge into the agency. So it's a mixture of the two, I think.
Okay, rounding up some of our viewer questions before we welcome some more as well. Someone asked, on the idea of the goldfish economy, is it more important for brands to be focused on immediate or current impact to capture attention, or should brands be looking to build long-term connection and visibility? Noah, Asper, anyone who'd like to answer that?
I'd like to try and tackle that one. So in my opinion, I think, partnership is something that's very big and important to me. Partnership or authenticity, I've spoken about this at length, but I would say I wouldn't look at short impact. Honestly, I wouldn't. I would look at brands trying to establish a longer term or longer means of communication, because I think that people are so much smarter than I think sometimes brands give them credit for. You don't want just a blitz in and a blitz out. You want to have brands that you can associate yourself with. And I don't mean just like on a public platform or anything, but you really want to align with brands that either that kind of speak to you, that speak your language, whether it be in a fun, light-hearted way or something that's maybe a more social impact. And I think that it's more longer-term relationships that at least from my experience, that we're looking to establish, because I think they're more rewarding, yes, from a literal brand perspective, but also just a relationships perspective. I think it's more rewarding than being cool for a little bit or doing a cool event or whatever it may be, and then you're gone, and then you're no longer heard of until you come back in again. And I personally don't think that brands should be looking to do that. I think it should be about establishing a long-term, long-standing audience, customers, depending, which industry or what your offering is, because I think that's more rewarding in terms of long-term value.
Cool. Noah, thinking about your experience, how would you answer this? What creates and influences a great customer experience, and how do you best craft future advertising campaigns with this in mind?
So we believe that 21st century brands are defined by the experiences they create and not just by the communications they put out. And what that means is it's on multiple levels, but it is about not just about what the brand says, it's about what the brand delivers, it's about how the brand behaves. It's bringing together all of these elements. For a brand to truly connect with an audience, the messaging you put out on what you say and what you're trying to get the consumer to buy and experience has to be felt at every single level. It has to be felt when you experience the product for the first time, the 5th time, the 100th time, or 1,000th time. And an example that we always use is the way Apple behaves. You see the work we do for Apple on something like the iPhone, but the level of craft and thinking that goes into the experience of when you first turn on the device, the time you use the device for the 100th time, the 1,000th time, or 5 years down the line, should be pretty much the same and consistent and bring you delight at every single point. And I think it's building those experiences all the way through that's really, really important. We were having a conversation last week with a potential client where we said to them, look, if you provide someone with a mediocre experience the first time round, then irrespective of how much better the experience gets later on the line, the initial interaction is usually how you're measured. So you need to make sure that the very first experience is exceptional and is carried through all the way. So building that experience into all of your planning, all the way the brand behaves, and then supported by great comms, I think is how you define that and build that out.
Fantastic. Those are great points. Thanks, Noah. Here's something from another viewer of ours this morning. Someone is asking, with such a heavy reliance on visual or audio content, how is advertising customized for people who experience difficulties with sight and hearing? Can the same advertisement be converted to Braille, for example? Don't know who can answer that.
I'm not sure if Noah wants to take this one, because I don't think that I could do this question justice. Right. Maybe just based on actual experience. So I'm going to hand it over to Noah.
Yeah, I'll take it on. So I think that's a fantastic question, first of all, and I think brands and agencies need to do a lot to make sure that we are inclusive. And that goes across multiple levels. It's how we cater to somebody that's visually impaired or hearing impaired, but also to the experiences brands create for those with other disabilities, and how we make sure they feel the same level of love and inclusion in what we stand for. So building that in, I think, is really important. Some of the work that is being done, which I'm quite excited about, is where you're able to produce design elements that let you give a different visual experience online for digital assets and digital presence for those that are having difficulty with their vision. making sure that, every single piece of work that is created is closed captioned for those that have difficulty with hearing audio. And also then building out things like Braille into more and more comms, into simple things like packaging, I think is incredibly important. And I think it's something that every single brand should embrace.
Great. So I want to look at the practical side and maybe another side of the Goldfish economy that we haven't explored yet this morning, which is now this working culture, the behind the scenes, how our teams are created and constructed. So Asper, when we look at, and let me get this right, by the way, number 2 account manager in South Africa at the 2020 and 2021 Luries Awards. When we look at team and culture, what is the advice that you'd give to young up-and-coming media professionals who are looking to have their creativity recognized?
Yeah, so the Luries ranking is definitely something that I'm super, super proud of. And it's honestly such an honor to have worked on the brands that I did and at the agency that I did, and all of that. And I'm very grateful to the Luries committee as well, just for that recognition, because it's big for me. I think that there has to be a bit of a strategic approach with this one. Honestly, if anyone's wanting to kind of be in the same space or be on that same track, in the sense that I definitely work at an agency, but I like to feel as though like I partner with one. So, partnership is very important to me, especially also when it comes to clients. I think that work comes out best when you feel as though you're a partner with your client as opposed to like serving them. But for an individual, I think the advice I could give is to really research which brand or agency you want to align yourself with or partner with. Do they care about awards? Do they, is that something that's what that they work towards? Have they entered awards, not competitions, but award shows in the past? Is it something that's on their radar? Because you'll find that a lot of agencies just either aren't there yet, or it might not be one of their main objectives, which is also fine. So does your agency actually, or the potential agency you want to partner with, do they actually care about that? I think that's a big one. Then also in entering awards competitions, they are not cheap. They are not 10 Rand to enter. So, do they have a budget that allows them to participate in those awards? I think definitely the kind of talent that you work with, because that's what produces the work. And absolutely to the individual, it is not only hard work, but I think smart work or working smartly, because there's a lot of components that go into, at least from my perspective and with my ranking, there's a lot of components that went into it. It wasn't just because I worked hard or just because it was a great idea. All of these factors come into play. And that's something that really needs to be considered. I know a lot of fellow account managers who are brilliant at their job and work really hard, really smartly, very passionate about what they do, that either haven't been on that list or currently aren't on that list. And it could be that one of those components haven't come into play. So I would say that someone really needs to consider where they want to go and who they want to work with. I know that when I first got into the industry, what drew me towards the advertising side was who I wanted to work for. So that was Geopolitical at the time when I first started. I knew that that's where I wanted to work because of their values, because of their outlook towards growth of not only the individual, but the brand and the nation as well. So you need to take that into consideration. When you work, you're going to be working 40 plus hours with a certain partner. And so you need to believe in it. You need to feel passionate about it. And I think when you have that understanding, I think that's when great work happens and you're able to achieve certain things like this Luries ranking.
Right, got it. Noah, similar question to you. What's your word of advice to young people who want to get into the advertising industry or who are already in the industry, and something that you'd like to impart on them around how they challenge the status quo, but as well, advertising and marketing professionals are known for working under pressure and working these long hours. How do you see the way we work changing from this digital burnout, and how will this affect business?
So again, great question. So my first piece of advice to anyone in the industry is don't pigeonhole yourself. So a lot of times you see people entering the industry as a strategist or a creative or an account person, and they sort of stay in that role for years and years and years. And I think we are lucky to be in an industry where there's so much excitement in every single space. My first piece of advice is to go explore. So if you're an account person, go spend some time with the strategy team and try and understand how strategic thinking impacts your brand. Try and get that into your mindset and your way of working. Try spending some time with the creatives. You may be a creative spirit that needs to come out and play. So go explore and try and embrace every facet of the industry. The second one is, I think if you are in an organization where you feel you're constantly being pushed and you're being overworked, then you're in the wrong organization. The great resignation that's been happening over the last couple of years, I think has been a true wake-up call to several companies where they'd assumed, irrespective of how they treated their people would stick around. Now they realize that your talent is your most valuable asset. If you don't appreciate them, if you put them under pressure, if you're going to drive them towards burnout, then they're always going to find a better home. So if you feel like you are with an employer where you're not being looked after, then you need to go find a home that's better for you, where they look after you, they take better care of you, and they give you the balance between work and life, because that balance is what drives your professional side, and that professional side has to allow room for you to actually enjoy the personal side of your life. If one's compromised over the other, then yeah, it's the wrong place.
Preach, Noah, preach. I agree with you there. We're about to wrap up in just a little bit. So wherever you're watching us from, we do appreciate that. So if you have any last questions for our panelists, please do send them in the last few minutes before we wrap up this hour. Noah, I want to come back to you now in looking at the fourth industrial revolution. It's more than just a buzzword or buzz phrase right now. But how do you think the acceleration of the fourth industrial revolution amid this pandemic has changed the way people consume media and forced a lot of businesses to rethink their marketing practice?
I think it's given a lot of companies room to stop and look at things like automation, where it may have been seen as something that needed to be done further down the line. It's become a lot closer to what they need to do now. It's also allowed us to do things at scale that we weren't able to do before. So looking at audience insights and sentiment in real time, trying to understand the supply chain that everyone's currently struggling with, trying to make sure your audience is being catered to. All of that stuff, I think, has been accelerated through the pandemic and has really benefited from what's come through on the fourth IR. I also think it led itself incredibly well to a lot of what we've had to do in the medical field. I think a huge amount of research has gone in and has been accelerated and scaled by the machine learning, the artificial intelligence capabilities we've got. That's helped us to get to things like vaccines and hopefully further vaccines and solutions for other diseases in the future. So yeah, no, I think it's an accelerant that's brought this a lot closer. I also think it's going to help us reshape the industries of many businesses in the next few years.
Got it. Espo, you've mentioned authenticity being one of your favorite words right now. In this conversation this morning, we spoke a lot about creativity. We spoke about innovation as well. In each and every brand that you work with, what is truly important to you, apart from what we've mentioned thus far, that you also stress?
Mm-hmm. I think it would be also passion, if I'm honest. I'm, one of the clients that I'm currently working with at Wrapped, he's super passionate about his brands, right? And so if anything for me, from an account management perspective, it pushes me to want to do better, right? It pushes me to interrogate things a little bit more and be of support in a way that I thought I already was. But when I feel that partnership and that passion coming from a client side, it really pushes me to want to do things a little bit further. So, you get a lot of people that may be working on a certain brand, it's their job. And then for others, you actually feel the passion coming from it. And that's what I feel from this client. So it makes me just want to do better and ask, or I don't know if this word is a little bit intense to use, but expect better from the team as well internally. Not like it's just, it has to pass through me, but it makes me push a little bit further. It makes me challenge them a little bit further and challenge myself as well. So I think it would be passion, or I don't know what other word you want to use for it, but passion, care, investment into wanting to see the brand, whatever it may be that you work on, do better than just ticking the box or getting those KPIs or whatever it may be, where you really want to see it impact, have an impact, or there to be change and there to be, like attraction or connection with the brand from, with your consumers, your audience, whoever it may be. That excites me. That excites me.
Good stuff. I love it. Love it. Love it. So just as we're wrapping up, Noah, Espo, thank you guys so much for being part of the conversation this morning. I want to give you like 10, 15 seconds each. If there's anything else that you'd love to leave our viewers with this morning, what would it be? Noah, anything from your side?
There was one really quick thing that I did want to mention. Is we've been talking about the goldfish attention span and how that is changing the audience and how brands represent themselves. And something we believe very heavily in is the fact that creativity should take as long as creativity takes. So you need to take as long as you need to tell a story, not limit yourself to the size of a format. So a good example is some of the biggest Hollywood blockbusters of the last year and this year have been over 2 hours long. So Matt Reeves as the Batman nearly runs at 3 hours. Spider-Man No Way Home runs at 2.5 hours. So Hollywood movies actually running for longer and longer because the directors and the filmmakers feel they need longer to get that true creativity and story out. So one thing I would leave the audience with is don't limit your creativity to fit a format. You can always find creative ideas to fit different formats, but take as long as you need to tell your story.
Look, Noah, I hear you. I wish we could have gotten into this earlier. Sometimes we don't need a 14-minute long Bohemian Rhapsody, though. Sometimes we just need a little 2 minutes in and out, okay?
Sure. Yeah.
As per your final comments this morning.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I absolutely loved what Noah said. Oh my goodness, that even resonates for me personally. But I think if anything would be maybe speaking to those who are empowered to employ. I really would like to challenge you and ask you to look further than a shiny CV. And something that Noah said earlier on, skills can be taught. They really can be taught and learned, but it's the kind of person, look at the kind of person you want on your team and look at their experience in terms of, like, from a cultural perspective, not in terms of just hardcore within industry, because there's so much talent out there. And there's so many people who could help your agency, your brand grow, but that just haven't had the opportunity to do so. So I'd say to those who are still trying to get into the industry, I know that it's exhausting and I know that it's very hard and it can be demotivating. but keep on trying. And then to those that are in power, would you please look further than the shiny CV and tertiary or formal education section, and look at the kind of person that you want to have on your team and the kind of person that you want to be able to help your business grow or your brand grow, because there's so much more out there. Yeah,
awesome
that's it.
Stuff. You two have been absolute rock stars. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and your great knowledge. We absolutely appreciate it. So that's Noah Khan, who's the Regional President of Digital and Innovation EMEA at TVWA and Dan. Thank you so much. And also Aspo Ofori Amanfo, who is the Senior Account Manager at Wrapped Creative Agency. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. And that was Advertising in the Goldfish Economy. Quite a great conversation, if I do say so myself. And some results from our poll today. We asked you 2 poll questions. We said, do you personally feel that your productivity and your creativity have been impacted? 78.1% of you responded saying yes, and 21.9% of you responded saying no. And our second poll question was, what is more important when developing a marketing campaign? 29% of you on the dot said grabbing attention quickly, and 71% of you on the dot responded saying evoking emotion. So that's really, really quite interesting stuff. So thank you so much for watching, for engaging with us, for also sharing your questions, your comments, and also engaging with our polls. We absolutely appreciate it. And a morning like this would not be possible as well if it wasn't for our sponsors. So a big, big thank you goes out to our sponsors, Time Bank, the Media Shop, TBWA, Arena Holdings, the Financial Mail, and Red Zone as well. So we absolutely appreciate it. So until next time, and actually you can put a time and a date to our next time. Our next Future of Media event is taking place on the 28th of April. You want to make sure that you're there. We'll be discussing the true meaning of purpose. How many times do you hear a brand talking about purpose? Well, what is the true meaning of it? We'll be looking at that on the 28th of April. And if you want to register and sign up for that to make sure that you're part of the Cool Kids Club, then you can do so by registering on quicklink.co.za/FOMTRU. So that's www.quicklink.co.za/FOM for Future of Media, and TRU for true meaning of purpose. See what we did there? Okay. Thank you for being with us. Other than that, my name is Sia Sangweni. Until next time on the 28th of April, have a great day. Bye-bye.